essence of plasticity is to create a window of attention and focus that's distinct from the rest of your day. So what are some ways that you can increase acetylcholine? How do you increase focus? The best way to get better at focusing is to use the mechanisms of focus that you were born with.
Ever caught yourself cleaning your desk, checking your phone, doing literally anything except the thing you actually need to do? That's not laziness. That's your brain playing tricks on you. And Dr. Andrew Huberman explains exactly why it happens and how to stop it for good. Here's the part most people don't realize. Procrastination is not a time management problem. And almost everyone gets this wrong because it looks like a willpower issue on the surface. In reality, it is a state problem. It is a biological and psychological state where your system is temporarily unwilling to engage in effort. And in that state, your brain will do something very specific. It will look for the easiest possible alternative that gives you relief. That is why you check your phone, clean your space, respond to messages, or do low-priority tasks. Sound familiar? We've all been there. Not because those things matter, but because they feel easier in the moment. But here's what nobody tells you about, and it changes everything. This is where most advice fails. People are told to just start, break tasks down, or build discipline. And while those ideas can help, they ignore something deeper. When you are in a state of low motivation, your brain is operating in what you could call a dopamine trough. It is a low-energy, low-drive state. And in that state, even small tasks can feel overwhelming.
We want to change those connections, those superhighways of connectivity. We have to engage in some very specific processes. And those processes, as we'll soon learn, are gated, meaning you can't just decide to change your brain. You actually have to go through a series of steps to change your internal state.
So when you try to just start, you are working against your current biology. But here is where things get interesting and where most people miss a powerful opportunity. Your brain's motivation system does not just respond to rewards. It responds to contrast. The way you move out of a low motivation state is not always by making things easier. Sometimes it is by making something feel harder. This sounds counterintuitive, but it is one of the most effective psychological shifts you can make. When you are procrastinating, you tend to drift toward what feels least effortful. But what actually resets your system is doing something that requires more effort than your current state. Not harmful, not extreme, but more demanding than staying stuck. And if that felt weird, that is good. This proves your brain is shifting. Here's what happens next. When you deliberately engage in something that feels uncomfortable, your brain begins to shift. It starts to re-regulate its internal state. And what once felt difficult, your actual task begins to feel more manageable by comparison. Think about it this way. If you are sitting in a state of procrastination, doing nothing feels neutral. Doing your work feels difficult. But if you introduce something more challenging, something that requires immediate effort, you change the baseline. Now your original task is no longer the hardest thing in front of you. This is why discomfort becomes a tool, not an obstacle. Counterintuitive, right? Stay with me, this is where it gets good. When we talk about discomfort, we are not talking about anything harmful. We are not talking about pushing yourself into injury or psychological strain. We are talking about controlled, safe, intentional discomfort, something that requires effort and creates a shift in your state. For some people, that might be physical. For others, it might be mental. The key is that it feels harder than doing nothing. That is the threshold. Because your brain does not measure difficulty objectively, it measures it relative to your current state. This introduces another important concept, limbic friction. Your brain is constantly negotiating between what feels easy and what feels difficult. When you are tired, distracted, or unmotivated, even small tasks create resistance. That resistance is what keeps you stuck. And most people respond to that resistance by avoiding it. But avoidance reinforces the pattern. It teaches your brain that resistance is a signal to stop. The shift happens when you reinterpret that resistance. Instead of seeing it as a barrier, you begin to see it as a signal. a signal that you are approaching something meaningful, a signal that your system is being challenged. And instead of stepping back, you step into it. Now, there are two main ways to do this. Which one is the right one for you? Let's find out. The first fix is simple: direct engagement. You push yourself to do a small portion of the task you are avoiding. You lower the barrier and create momentum. This works for many people, but not always. Because sometimes the resistance is too strong. Sometimes even a small step feels impossible. That is where the second method becomes powerful: indirect activation. Instead of trying to force yourself into the task, you shift your state first. You do something unrelated that requires effort, something that changes your internal chemistry, something that breaks the pattern of passivity. This could be physical movement, it could be exposure to a challenging environment, it could be anything that creates a noticeable shift in how your body and mind feel. The key is that it is intentional. You are not escaping the task. You are not distracting yourself. You are resetting your internal state on purpose. Click pause and try it right now. Stand up, do 10 slow deep breaths or 5 push-ups, then open your task for just 2 minutes. After this, come back, because what I'm about to explain next is why this actually works on a biological level. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because one keeps you stuck, while the other prepares you to act. And once your state changes, your capacity to act changes with it. What felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable. What felt impossible begins to feel like something you can at least attempt. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They wait. They wait for motivation to return. They wait for clarity, energy, or urgency to show up before they begin. It feels logical. It feels responsible. But waiting keeps you in the same state. And the longer you stay in that state, the more familiar it becomes. It starts to feel normal to delay, to hesitate, to postpone. Over time, that pattern becomes automatic. You don't even question it anymore. You just assume you are someone who struggles to start. But action is what changes your state, not the other way around. You do not act because you feel motivated. You feel motivated because you act. This is the reversal that most people never fully accept. They believe motivation is a prerequisite, when in reality, it is often the result. The moment you take action, even in a small way, you interrupt the cycle. But there's one mistake almost everyone makes right after this moment, and it kills all the progress. They take action briefly. Take action before you feel ready. And most importantly, repeat that process long enough for it to become your new normal. Because in the end, motivation is not something you discover or stumble upon. It is something you build through action, through repetition, and through the willingness to continue, even when it does not feel rewarding yet. If any of this hit you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop in the comments, what's the one task you keep putting off? Hit like if you're trying the 2-minute rule today, and subscribe for more Huberman science that actually changes how you live. See you in the next one.